welcome. Honestly, don't know what the date is even. It's the 28th. Okay. So it's an even day. We'll take the dominant cross-legged position and just take a moment to pull the flesh out from under your sitting bones, rock back and forth a few times, try to create more balance. Also start to kind of play with weight from the backs to the fronts of the sitting bones and really try to find the center points of your sitting bones, establishing a good connection with the floor. And hopefully out of that, your legs start to take on more ease. They start to release at the thighs and hips. When we establish this firm base, the upper body gets the signal that it can become lighter and more elongated. Take a moment to put your shoulders above your hips, put your skull over your spine. Roll the shoulders back, and then when you have all of that, bring the hands together in front of your heart, using the base of the thumbs to just lightly press up on the sternum or the flesh of the chest. Just kind of imagine the flesh of the chest rising up and then going over the shoulders and down the back. Try to create evenness to the front body and the back body. Sometimes here we push a little bit forward in the abdomen. Just make sure you're keeping the lumbar long as well. Relax your jaw, close your eyes, looking away from your brain. And just arriving not only into your body, but onto your mat and into this time frame that you've carved out for your practice. Letting the mind catch up with where you are right now. And just do a little information gathering here of whatever the full picture is of how you're showing up on a physical level, mental, emotional, what the breath is doing right now. Maybe there's some sort of focus for this practice today. Maybe there isn't. Just acknowledging as much of the full picture as you can. Remember that this work we do is half noticing and the other half is allowing. So make sure you're doing both pieces here. See if you can keep your chest lifted and spread as you bow towards your heart, lowering the chin toward the chest. Release your hands. And on an in-breath, let your head lift, let your eyes open. And welcome. So we have a bonus week here. Well, it's partial week. And so I decided we can do some hip work, which I always think is great work. And we're going to work with the 6 actions of the hips today. And I've kind of planned the class in 3 segments. So we're going to do 6 actions 3 times for the hips. And the first set, we're going to start reclining. So you can create a support for your head if you like to use a blanket under your head. And you'll want to have your strap available. And then you can come down onto your back. These 6 actions that we're going to work with are the flexion and extension of the hips, adduction, which means to move in, abduction, which means to move out, and then internal, external rotation. So just similar to the 6 actions of the spine that we often do. It's the same movements, just applied to the hip and the pelvis and the femur bone. So we're going to work all these muscle groups that surround the skeletal area. And we're going to draw just because it's facing you, let's draw the left leg in, and you can place your hands over your shin. Some people prefer the back of the thigh. And then feel free to extend your right leg. And every time you exhale, you're just going to connect a little bit more with your breath and squeeze in a little bit deeper. Our hips are kind of tricky spots because they have a lot of resistance that's kind of built in, some of it from past experience, some of it just mechanically built in. So we do have to kind of hold hip work a little bit longer, just to kind of wait out some reflexes in the body. So just take these initial moments, let your breath kind of start to set that natural coordination of hugging that thigh closer as you exhale. Inhale, you'll just kind of release some of that pressure, just kind of backing off so the belly has room to maybe grow a little bit as you breathe in. And we do get a lot more hip flexion than we get extension, but just to keep the practice balanced today, we're gonna include the flexion. After your exhalation, go ahead and step the foot down. Keep the foot resting as you draw the right leg in. And then once you have hold of your right leg, extend your left leg. Let it be passive. And just connecting with the breath and noticing how that's a nice opportunity to squeeze that thigh a little closer to your chest. We're all anatomically different. We all have different shapes to our hips and different limitations and mobilities. So you might notice here as we're just attempting to directly draw in, your tendency might be to pull out or to pull in with the knee. So you might notice you have a little bit of favoring to your rotation, to your abduction, adduction. So always noticing. Let's see what you can find here. We'll take about 5 more exhales. Remember, the exhales are often longer than we allow time for, so really lingering in the out breath. Good. We're going to save the flexion for a little bit later just because it doesn't flow so well. So we'll step the foot down now. And we're going to come into abduction, which means we're going to take the kind of the hip away from midline and the femur bone away from midline in the hip joint. So take your strap, and I'm just deciding here, let's make a loop with it. So you're going to pass your tail through your rings. I, of course, have this super long strap to deal with here. Make a loop and take hold of your foot. And because today we're talking about bone and joint, the placement of the strap is closer to the heel than it is to the ball mounds, so that we get a really nice connection of the femur head into the ball and socket joint. So now you just have one tail to deal with. You can wrap your hand so that you don't have to squeeze so hard with your grip. You can also slide down the strap until your elbow touches the floor, which will keep your shoulder nice and spread and your chest nice and spread. Extend your right leg. Extend your right arm sideways for some counterweight. And then before you take the leg out, you're going to just kind of pull down on your strap and just kind of affirming the connection of the femur head into the hip socket. Really stabilizing yourself there. Feel like you have a fulcrum. And then keep track of that as you start to move the leg out to the side. Just kind of imagine the femur head moving inside the hip socket. Just kind of visualize it. Of course, you know the actions to kind of restore some weight to your right side body. If you feel like you're tipping over, only take that left leg as far as you can maintain some evenness across your sacrum and your pelvis, your shoulder girdle. Try to reach out through the inner left foot here so that we don't sickle the foot or lose. We don't want to get dull to the inseam of the left leg. We want to really feel awake and alive. The upper inner thigh, the inner groin. And of course, your foot is as close to shoulder line as you can maintain with a straight leg. So first priority is straight leg. Second priority is starting to guide it toward the shoulder line. Good. Now you're going to start to bring it back. Try to use an exhalation. Keep track of that fulcrum point where you meet the floor. Really keep pulling on your strap firmly. And now we'll come into adduction. We're going to pass the strap over to the right hand. Reach the left arm out sideways. And then on an exhale, you're going to just gently guide your leg to or through midline. And again, watch that you don't drop the inner foot. Keep the inner foot pressing up and keep your left buttock, as much contact as you can of the left buttock against the floor. And always be thinking about how the femur head is just really nice and snug in the hip joint. Keep pulling down if that helps you kind of reassure that connection. Breathe into it. Wonderful. Now we're going to take this into external hip rotation. So you can start to bend the knee out to the side and draw the left ankle to the right thigh. So you're going to be bending your right knee. You can leave this strap alone. So this is kind of a pose that we have to kind of talk about everybody's level here. So we're starting at the most mild. Just pressing your left hand and pressing into the left knee and just giving a little pressure there. See how your hip responds. This might be perfectly enough for you. Next, you might raise the right foot from the floor and either catch the right shin or the right thigh with your hands, which frees up your left elbow to keep adding a little bit of resistance to the inner knee or thigh. And then just like when we started with hip flexion, notice how every exhale is an opportunity just to kind of snug in, to draw the legs toward your chest, also to tip your chin toward your chest. It's early on in the class to go a lot further, but I'll just tell you here, if you still need a little more, you can hold your knee and your outer ankle with your hands and move the shin so you have a midline of the shin connecting, aligning with the midline of the chest. And then also draw the leg in. Draw the leg toward your chest. This can be a little bit deeper than the previous version. Just stay for a couple more exhalations. Good. Just to take care of the knee in case we rotate it at all. Don't want that. Just shoot the leg up, flex the foot, pull the toes toward you. And then go ahead and take the strap away. So we'll repeat those actions on the right side. You can just take your little loop over to your right foot and remember to slide down so you're closer to the heel than you are the ball mount. Feel free to wrap your hand and slide down the strap until your elbow hits the floor. And then extend your left leg. And before we take the leg out to the side, just find that connection. Find your straight leg, sink the femur head into the hip socket. Really feel the buttock firm against the floor. We're going to try to use that and keep that sensation as we move the leg out to the side, as we abduct. On an exhalation, keeping that awareness, start to move the leg sideways. Reach that left arm out sideways. Remember to reach out through the inner foot. Try to bring some weight back over to your left sacrum, hip, shoulder. Anchor into the left leg as well. Keep working with your straightest leg and your leg and foot moving toward the shoulder line. And now keeping yourself nice and heavy to the floor with the right buttock, start to move back to the middle. You can take your left hand onto the strap. Reach your right arm out sideways. Start by just kind of hanging down, creating that connection of the thigh bone into the hip joint, and then start to gently move to, possibly through midline, reaching up through the instep of the foot, the big toe ball mound, the inner right heel, drawing the flesh of the right buttock back to the floor, keeping your legs straight. And give it some breath. For a lot of us, this is a high sensation pose. We've got IT bands really waking up here. Deep breath, combing through that tension with your breath. Again, envision what's going on in the hip socket here, the femur head really plunging deeply and kind of giving a lot of pressure to the outer hip socket here. Wonderful. And now go ahead and find your way back to center. And we're going to take that figure 4 shape, stepping the left foot to the floor, crossing the right ankle to the thigh. Make that assessment first. Don't assume you're going to fly into the same position as you did on the left. So just add a little pressure. Notice if it's too mild. Maybe pick up the left leg either from back of the thigh or front of the shin. Work with that kind of hugging action. When you breathe out, you're going to draw the legs closer, but you might also be pressing away through the right elbow to create a little more resistance and openness in the hip. And for a lot of us, we don't need to go much farther here, including myself, but of course you can feel free to take hold of the ankle and knee with your hands, and then you can step down that left foot. And then you would be aligning the shin kind of toward midline a little bit and toward the chest. So let's take 5 deep exhalations. And after that 5th exhalation, go ahead and step down with the foot if you had it elevated from the floor. Just shoot the right leg up for a moment, firming the leg, straightening the leg, dorsal flexion with the foot, just to really stabilize your knee, align your knee. Good. And now we'll get the last 2 actions in the prone position. So we're going to be flipping over. You can move your blanket aside if you had one. And so we're going to get some hip extension in first, hip flexor extension. So just lying down on your belly, just take a hand and sense and touch where the groin, so where the thigh meets the pelvis. Usually for most of us, there's a concave divot there. So we're trying to really flatten that out and open that up. So what we're going to do is individually take the legs from the heel toward the buttock. So you're going to cross your left arm in front of your forehead. You can rest on it. I'm going to keep my head up so I can keep talking. And then you're going to bend your right knee, and you may need that little loop with your belt to make a connection to the front ankle if you can't reach directly. So feel free to use your strap to make that connection. And we're more interested in lengthening the hip flexor region than we are with how close the heel comes to the buttock. So one way to kind of work with that is to extend out through the 4 corners of the kneecap. We don't want to be, remember I told you, we all have tendencies to internally and externally rotate. We're not doing that just yet. We're trying to be straight on with the heel toward the buttock, not to either side of the buttock. And keeping a lot of awareness to the hip flexor region, flattening out, lengthening out, extending. And one way you can support that is the pelvic tilt, the posterior pelvic tilt, taking the front rim of the pelvis kind of toward your chest, taking back rim of the pelvis toward the lower buttock. Meanwhile, keeping the left leg passive, not allowing it to activate. It might try to keep it passive and heavy. We're attempting to keep as much of the surface area of the front thigh on the floor as we can. We're not trying to lift the knee. Last 3 breaths here. We'll go ahead and finish the exhalation and go ahead and release hold of the right foot. And we'll be resting the forehead now on the right forearm. We will be taking hold of the left ankle, either directly or with your strap. And when you take hold, try to either look or sense that your knee is as wide as your hip. It's not wider, it's not narrower. You want to be very lined up here. Think about the four corners of the kneecap lengthening back away from your body. Take the pelvic tilt so that you lengthen the lumbar. You start to iron out the left hip flexor. And we don't want to uproot the knee or the quadriceps right above the knee. So really try to keep surface area on the floor. Keep right leg passive, the buttocks soft. Try to sense the heels moving directly toward the buttock. It's not moving outward or inward, just head on, straight on. And of course, always applying the breath. Awareness and allowance. The breath is the allowance piece. We're showing up to where we are. We're giving it some breath, some attention. Good. Now, last but not least, we're going to do internal hip rotation, Bakasana, not the full pose, just mostly about the hips today. So you're going to go back to your left arm crossing in front of your chest. This time you're not resting your head. You'll keep your chest lifted and your elbow is right under your shoulder line. You're going to have your knees come together. So think about this as a prone version of hero pose. The knees are coming together and the heels are going to be directed toward the outer hip. For most of us, there's going to be a big distance between the heel and the hip, but we're trying to move in that direction, creating internal hip rotation. So we're going to go ahead and bend the right knee again. Again, sorry if you have to use a strap, it's a lot of back and forth, but you'll take hold of the foot one way or the other. If you know the Bakasana hold, you can find it here, turning the hand around, the fingers pointing forward. But really keep track of the knees staying together and guiding the heel toward the outer hip. There's asymmetry in the arms. We have one down and one up. So try not to kind of crash into your left shoulder. Keep some evenness across the shoulder girdle. Still working with the same pelvic tilt here. A lot of the same actions we did previously to extend hip flexors are applied here as well. We'll go ahead and start to release that. Extend the leg again. You can set up your right arm so you're right under the shoulder line. Your arm is crossing in front of the chest. Make sure the knees are together. We're going to be taking left heel toward outer left hip, grabbing directly or with the strap. Trying to close that little gap where the hip flexor yawns open right above the floor, taking the tailbone into the soft tissue of the body, trying to create more evenness across the shoulder line. And 4 breaths. And go ahead and start to soften out of it. You can keep both knees bent, take both knees into a bent position and step them to hip distance width. Make a little pillow out of your arms and let your legs float from side to side. All right. We're going to find our way to kind of a malasana. So this is squatting action. This is deep hip flexion. So what we're going to be doing is coming onto our feet. So here's the deal, is a lot of us have some knee limitations and we have to work with that. So full deep knee flexion isn't possible for some of us. So you can always prop the buttocks with a couple blocks with a blanket, kind of creating a little plateau for yourself. You could use a chair, and then I didn't bring one into this room, but if you're sitting on a chair, the way you get deeper into the hip flexion is you put height under the feet. So you can kind of manipulate these poses to, just like we did last week, have the props meet your needs. So if you're going to use a chair, just take maybe a couple blocks or put your blocks on their tall edges, and you can step the feet onto them. If you're able to squat, we're doing a wide squatting position for our intents and purposes today, which is not malasana. Malasana is a different pose where the feet are joined. But we're going to just take a few breaths squatting here, nice and deep. Try to keep your torso upright. You might take your arms to your inner knees. You might take your hands together. Try to have the feet nice and wide. So some of these poses today are going to have a combination of actions in the hip, but we will get to all 6 for this set, but we're going to use this squatting as our flexion, even though there's some external rotation happening here. We're really trying to kind of sink into those hip joints nice and deep. Give them a little massage. Keep your chest forward. And if anytime you're squatting, there's a potential for the energy of the spine to kind of fall to the floor, because we live in a gravity field. So it's a great opportunity to engage just a little bit of a contraction at the pelvic floor. That action should not take any more effort than it takes your eyes to blink. So it's a very light, delicate maneuver to shuttle the energy up the spine. 5 more breaths, nice and deep. Remember those exhales, we can kind of lean into them. We can go a little bit farther physically on our exhalations most of the time. A lot of countries, third world countries especially, they don't have folding chairs. You see a lot of people actually sitting like this doing their daily things, and it's very healthy for the hip joints. I once thought I would create a bumper sticker that was a folding chair with the X through it, just because it's just not as much mobility for the hips when we sit in chairs all day. All right, so we're gonna find our way out of this. Start to move on to your knees and just take a child's pose, sitting back, a little bit more flexion for the hips. Rest your forehead. Take a few deep breaths. And now we'll do Anjaneyasana, which is our low lunge, which is a wonderful way to work with extension in the hips. So I usually recommend you have a blanket for your knees, or you can always double your mat up in the middle if you don't have a blanket. Some people need blocks to give a little more support and length to the arms for this one as you kind of get into the pose. We're going to start with the left knee kneeling and the right foot stepping down. We're going to start with the right ankle in line with the right knee. We're going to start with the left knee in line with the left hip. But then you're going to just take either your blocks in your hands or touch the floor. Curl your left toes under, pick up the knee and extend the leg completely. And once you've extended the leg completely, you're attempting to lower the knee directly down, straight down to where, if there was a shadow, it would be right down there. So we're taking the knee farther back without dragging the kneecap. And you can rest that knee again and be on the top of the foot again. And from here, use your right thigh for support as you bring yourself upright with your trunk. And then bring your hands onto your hips. Tip the pelvis back and just take the torso forward like you're sliding on a moving walkway. You're not tilting the torso forward. You're moving straight ahead like there's a book on your head. Keep your elbows clamping in a little bit. Your skull should be above your spine, not jutting out. Chin should not be jutting out. And every time you exhale, yawning open left hip flexor. Try to keep your lumbar long by taking the tailbone toward the front body, pelvis gently tipping back. on an inhale, you're gonna pull back, and we're gonna switch out the knee and foot. So now right knee is kneeling and left foot is stepping down, and you're starting lined up with a vertical left shin, a vertical right thigh bone. And then using the support of your blocks or the floor, curl those right toes under, extend the leg, and then attempt to place the knee directly down. So not letting it come forward. And we're set up for a lot of extension. So I left my blanket in doing that, so I'm just making an adjustment. And then use your left thigh for support to bring yourself up. Be on the top of the right foot. Take hold of your hips, and you can manually tip the pelvis back by kind of using your fingertips, pressing down with the thumbs, up with the forefingers. Squeeze the elbows a little bit closer together. Adjust the skull if you feel like you're throwing the head forward, which does happen when we open the chest, when we do back bends. And just bringing awareness now to the right hip flexor, the right groin. Every time you exhale, you're just applying a little bit of momentum forward. And when you inhale, you might stay forward. You might gently pull back. Sometimes entering and leaving, deeper sensation can be useful. Sometimes just kind of lingering there can be useful as well. Let's just stay 5 more breaths. You're either looking on the horizon line or slightly up. And then the next inhale, you can use it to kind of help you pull back. And you're going to step that left knee onto your blanket. And again, you can sit back in child's pose or do any counter pose that feels restful to you here. We will be doing one standing pose today next. So after you've kind of connected with your breath and known, kind of seen the side effects of what you just done, then you can start to find your way to standing. Okay, so we're going to come into abduction with prasarita padottanasana. This is wide standing forward bend. I just want you to notice the reason this is an external hip rotation is because our toes stay in front of our heels. If our toes turned out, then we'd start to be externally rotating the hips. But right now they're just moving out from midline. So we're meeting the requirements for hip abduction. You can use your blocks, of course, if you need a little bit of support for your hands, or maybe your hands come easily to the floor. But we're going to start in the concave or flat back position. Try to extend your torso out over the floor. Try to balance the weight bearing over the feet. And like we know so well in yoga, we are always working with equalizing things. So we have a lot of kind of away from midline action right here. So finding a way to bring moving inward action toward midline. Let's bring that focus to the outer ankles. The outer ankles are going to move in as your hips move away from midline. And then keeping that, just allowing yourself to come into your deepest version. You keep the hands on the blocks, they move with you as you kind of start to walk into the line between the toes, or the hands come onto the floor directly. The elbows are just as wide as shoulders. So squeezing the elbows in helps you broaden the chest and shoulders. And the head is just like a bowling ball, just really suspended from the spine, nice and heavy. We'll stay 5 breaths. Always visualizing, if you can, that relationship of the thigh bone, the femur head in the hip joint. See if you can visualize it, see it in your mind's eye. Good. Last exhale here. Inhale, you can start to walk the hands forward and just do heels and toes until you have your feet right in line with your hips. You can come up. This is where I have to adjust the camera. I told you we had one standing pose. I forgot we're doing eagle pose next, which is a standing pose. Hopefully you can see me here. Good enough. So we're gonna do adduction now. Eagle pose is a great one where we cross midline. And this is a balancing pose, but feel free to really modify it to meet your needs. Stepping down on the right foot, we're gonna pick up the left foot and cross it to the outer right foot. And we're gonna all keep our left toes down for now. You're gonna squeeze your hips toward midline, compact your hips. And when we have a standing leg, which we do here with the right leg, there's a lot of poking out with the hip potential. We wanna suck that outer hip bone in. We wanna really adduct. So imagine you're holding a coin between your thighs. Then if you want to, if you're able to, you'd slide the foot up the leg and you'd have more of a balancing act going on. Knees should both be pointing forward and bent, not tree pose where the one knee is out to the side. We're gonna take our arms out in front of us like we're holding a box. So your elbows are level with your shoulders, you have right angles there. You're gonna be tucking the right elbow underneath the left. And then either grabbing your shoulders to modify the arms or taking your right fingertips to your left palm. Really hugging everything to midline. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Pull that outer left hip bone in, right hip bone in, sorry. Good. Inhale, you're gonna step out with your left foot. You're gonna open your arms. Your feet can still be parallel, toes in front of heels. Extend out through your fingertips. Close your eyes. And all of that strong inward moving energy, we're just kind of sending it back out through 5 points. The crown, the fingertips, the feet. And go ahead and release your arms. Step the feet together. We'll try the other side. And you could have differences. So just starting always with a more modified approach and then taking it farther as you're able to. So right foot is going to cross in front of left. We're going to squeeze the hips together. You're going to feel the thighs move together nice and strong. Really sucking that outer left hip bone in toward midline. Maybe then sliding the foot up the leg. Try to keep both knees like they're little shock absorbers. So we don't want to have a stiff flamingo leg is what I call it. We want to be responsive to micro movement. And then the arms, again, that little box you're holding between your hands. This time, left elbow comes under right. And either grabbing your shoulders or hooking the left fingers to the right palm. Squeezing everything to midline, especially factoring in your standing leg and that action of adduction, moving toward the midline, the femur head, moving over toward the midline. And on an inhale, you're going to unwrap yourself, step out to the right. Your toes are in front of your heels, arms extended. Maybe close the eyes or just do a slow blink. And send all that energy back out again. Let your breath regulate. Good. We'll go ahead and release the arms. And step the feet together. And now we're going to come into external hip rotation with gate pose. So again, you might want to take that blanket for your kneeling knee. Again, we're kind of looking for these 90 degrees here, the 90-degree right knee. You should be right on top of hip above knee with the left knee. And you want to line up your right heel with your left knee. So all these things have to happen for good alignment. And we are going to take that right hand to the inner right knee and pressing there. Turn your torso to the left so that you align your shoulders and hips to the broad side of the mat. Think about the action of that right buttock kind of rolling under toward the front body. This sneaky right hip is going to try to turn. That's a way we avoid external rotation. So your job is really to keep your headlights, your hips even on the front body. Inner thighs starting to come alive and awake. Give it some breath. There's a tendency in external hip rotation for the lumbar spine to shorten laterally. So imagine the flesh of your lower back, and if it's all scrunchiled up together, find a way to broaden it again. Sometimes the underside of the umbrella with the abdomen is a good image to keep some spaciousness there. Good. And now you're going to gently release. We're going to go to the other side. So kneeling with the right knee, stepping on the mat with the left foot and setting yourself up. So we have that vertical left shin, vertical right thigh, heel in alignment with the knee. And then we'll pressurize the inner knee here. Just do a little clamping in with your right elbow so that you're keeping your chest broad, your shoulder girdle broad. Try to roll that left buttock toward the front body. Keep revolving your torso gently from left to right. And sense if that left hip point is trying to rotate back to avoid the depth that's possible here. Give it some breath. Meanwhile, notice how you have to do a little adduction with your right hip. You have to move it to midline so that we're not poking out. Good. Go ahead and release that. And to complement the external hip rotation, we're going to come into hero pose, which is wonderful internal hip rotation. So everybody has their own kind of Goldilocks setup for that because we all have different bodies, different limitations, different anatomies. So we're going to set up our seated hero pose. And you want to create support for the sitting bones. You want to make sure that your knees can handle this. Sometimes adjusting the flesh of the thighs and calf muscles will do the trick. Sometimes we have to sandwich a blanket from the backs of the knees towards the buttocks. And also sometimes we have to take ample support under the buttocks only because of the knees. So there's no wrong way to do it as long as you're in alignment and supported. So just like when we were in the prone position, we have four corners of the knees. And so that we're not misaligning our knees, which can always happen when we work with hips. It's always a potential. We want to make sure that the four corners of the knee are looking straight on. And for most of us, what we tend to see is the inner knees angle down. So the way to kind of adjust for that is to rotate the outer shins toward the floor, maybe to move the flesh of the thighs inward, move the flesh of the calf muscles outward, to grip the floor with your small toes. And once you see those knees pointing straight on, you also want to keep them close. We don't want wide knees. Okay, so feet and hands are in connection, which will help you bring your shoulders above your hips. And of course, touching your bolster if you're using a bolster. Take the tailbone in, adjust your skull right above your spine. Think about the flesh of the outer shins rotating down. And again, sensing what your femurs are doing inside those hip joints. There's inward rotation, there's pressure to the outer hip sockets. Looking straight ahead, but keeping your attention really pulling back inside yourself. Give it some breath. As we start to develop this pose, we eventually work toward reclining hero. You might just start to walk your hands back, and then we start to incorporate hip extension as well. We start to get nice ironed out hip flexors eventually. So you might just kind of test the waters, angling back, seeing if you can maintain the integrity of the pose. Go ahead and help yourself back upright if you did. Do a little bit of a Supta Virasana, reclining hero. And now just bring yourself into downward dog. This is a great way to release that hero pose, to support the knees being in alignment and to extend the backs of the knees fully. The feet are hip distance, the hands are shoulder width apart. Before you straighten your legs, take your chest as close to your thighs as you can, and then move the flesh of the thighs from front to back, lifting the kneecaps, extend the legs. Good. Now find your way down to kneeling, and then we're gonna set up a seated position. Sitting on a blanket usually is a good choice for most of us. It helps us keep the posture tall rather than slumped or rounded. And we're coming into our third set. So we're on our last stretch here with the 6 actions of the hips. So we're gonna come into Marichyasana. So from Dandasana, take the legs forward. Be right on the edge of your blanket. You might even pull the flesh out from under the sitting bones, kind of from the inner thighs out to the outer hips. You might bifurcate the legs. If you have kind of bulkier and more muscular, fleshy legs, you might run your fingers down the back and just get those legs to sit down more closely to the floor. We're gonna work with the right leg folding in first. So we're gonna work with right hip flexion here. Take the right heel toward the right sitting bone. And the idea is to bring the heel as close as you can without rolling onto your tailbones. You still want to be perched on the centers of your sitting bones. Good. We're going to take our hands over the right shin. Your left leg is activated. Your elbows are kind of winging out and up. And we're going to take 5 breaths, plunging that femur head into the hip socket, deepening that connection, deep, deep flexion here. Try to keep rolling the outer right hip down. Try to keep a sense of weightedness in the right sitting bone, sense of evenness between the sitting bones. Notice resistance. We all kind of meet that with hip work. And then maybe notice a softening start to take place after we wait out some of those reflexes. A full commitment flexion here. A lot of times we do kind of quasi-passive flexion in lifestyle movement. So this is a full commitment hip flexion here. Beautiful. I'll go ahead and soften out of that and extend the right leg. Take a moment in Dandasana, sitting up tall. And then we're going to draw from the back of that left knee, draw the heel toward the sitting bone. Directly in front of the sitting bone, toes and directly in front of the heel. We're not working with hip rotation just yet. And then we're going to kind of interlock the hands right over the shin, lift and spread the elbows, and pressing on that shin, your chest and thigh are forced to come together. Stay over the sitting bones. Every exhale, chance to really deepen that connection. Good. And release. Okay, so for hip flexor extension, we are going to come back onto our front sides. You can put a blanket to the hip line, hip and pelvis, so that you have comfort. It's just about comfort, really. So you don't want it to be super bulky because that would misalign you, but it's just about taking that hard edge away from your skeleton meeting the floor. And we're going to then step our knees to the edges of the mat. And with elbows in line with shoulders, you're going to turn your fingers 45 degrees so your thumbs become the straight ahead extension of the inner wrist, which gives you a little bit of a feeling that you can spread the chest and rotate the shoulders back. Okay, so you're going to bring a lot of weight into your elbows. This is a back bend, so of course you're taking the pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt. And then from here, you're going to join the feet slowly, but keep the knees wide. Join the feet. And then on an exhale, pressing into the floor, extend your arms and try to rotate the inner elbows up. Thinking about those hip flexors, ironing them out. So again, we're doing a little external hip rotation here as well. Begin to bring the elbows back down. Extend your legs. Fold up your arms to make a little pillow. And then move your knees in just so they're wide as the hips. And then go ahead and sweep the legs back and forth. Good. You're going to bring yourself back up to seated. We're going to come into Upavishta Konasana. So remember we did Prasarita Padottanasana. This is basically the seated version of that same pose. So this is abduction again, hips moving out away from midline. Toes above heels are going to keep it neutral as far as rotation. So put your toes in line with your heels. Be on the perch of your sitting bones. You might move the flesh, you might move on your blanket somehow. And then bring your hands behind you, just behind the outer hips. Roll the shoulders back. And as you feel more buoyant and light in the torso, try to create more anchoring in your legs. And then imagine there's a little spacer. So we don't want to kind of collapse into those hip joints. We want to kind of keep space here in the hip joints. So as you press down into the floor, try to lift your pelvis up off the floor, but keep the sitting bones grounded. And lean forward by tilting the pelvis forward, keeping the chest forward. Don't lead with your chin. Keep the shoulders externally rotated. We're bringing a little hip flexion in as well here. Keep anchoring into your legs, lifting the torso, keeping that lightness. Sometimes when we do these types of poses where we're abducting and flexing, you can get crampy. So it's very important to keep a sense of spaciousness. I had a teacher that I was very prone to this cramping, and she would put a dowel at my hip line and it would relieve all that pain because I tended to collapse. So keep lifting the torso as you fold into those hip joints. Beautiful. Now inhale and come back up. All right. So we're going to bring the legs back together. If you had to modify your malasana squat, which we did earlier with the wide feet, you're going to come back to Marichyasana and work with the arm against the inner leg and squeeze in there, okay? If you're able to do the squatting action, because there's not a great chair modification for this one, so you come back to Marichyasana if you have to modify. We're going to work with Bakasana, which is crane pose. And this is strong adduction. So you're in a squat, however, the feet are more narrow. So like Kathy, if you're gonna stay seated, the arm inside the knee, you're gonna squeeze the knee to the arm. You're working with adduction, and you can hold that as long as you can sustain and then take a break. For those of us working, this is an arm balancing pose. We're not gonna do the arm balancing piece today. We're just gonna work with strong adduction. So everybody's kind of getting the same experience, just a little bit differently. So you're off your heels. Your knees are wider than your feet. Your feet don't have to be completely together if they aren't able to do so. And your arms are within the space of your knees. You're gonna clamp the knees around the arms. So if you're in Marichyasana, you're doing that with one arm at a time. And I'll kind of tell you when it's time to switch. So you're clamping. Eventually in this pose, you're clamping to keep the knees and shoulders connected, and you're coming up onto your arms only. But today we're just working with the hips, really clamping in strongly. Try to envision the femur head, it's really pressing out here as the knees press in. And if you're in Marichiasana, you're going to switch it out to the other side. If you're still in Bakasana, take a moment, taking your arms forward and bowing your head. And so either side 2 or second time around if you're doing Bakasana. So arms within the space of the knees. The shoulders and knees are trying to form a connection here. So you're kind of making yourself very compact, and then you're squeezing those knees to your shoulders. So remember when I said that external hip rotation causes the low back to shorten laterally? Well, now you can envision when we internally rotate hips and when we adduct, we have a broader experience across the low back. Good. And again, come back to arms forward, head bowing, or release that Marichiasana. And then we'll go ahead and have a seat. Good work. Okay, so we're winding into our last 2 poses. This is coming up right up at the end of class here. So we're going to do Baddha Konasana, joining the feet, supporting the knees. And because we're so short on time, we just did internal rotation, so we're going to include that, and we'll skip that last internal rotation pose so that we don't super shortchange our Shavasana, because we can consider what we just did internal hip rotation. The soles of the feet together. You're going to grab the front/outer ankles with your hands. And then you're going to sit up right on top of those sitting bones. Shoulders back. Reaching out from the inner thighs through the inner knees. Find a way to broaden laterally across the low back. Maybe every in-breath spreading the abdomen toward the low back. Wonderful. And softening those efforts. You can straighten the legs out in front of you. And then you're going to find your way onto your back. Take any movements that you need once you're on your back. Maybe a little bit of windshield wipering your legs back and forth, maybe hugging the legs in, reclining child. You're going to come into your final resting pose, spreading the limbs, the feet a little bit wider than hips, the legs long, the flesh of the buttocks lengthened away from the torso. The palms turned up, the shoulders resting, the skull aligning well with the trunk. And once you've created the alignment, try to let go of any lingering effort. Let the body grow soft and heavy. Noticing and allowing. You can stay longer if you like. This was a very short Shavasana today, so try to close quietly here if you're going to stay. If you're going to come out of the pose, just start to move a little bit. Take a few deeper breaths, letting movement trickle in from the fingers and toes. Folding the hands onto the chest or belly, sliding the soles of the feet to the floor. And then shifting to either side of your body, just holding there for a few moments. And trying to come to seated by minimizing effort, only what is needed. Keep the brain and the body really subdued, nice and quiet. When you find yourself seated, joining the hands together in front of the heart again, pressing up a little bit through the base of the thumbs, inviting the sternum to lift, pointing your gaze down away from the brain. Let's take a breath in through the nose and let it go. From the place within me that I know to be divine, I honor that place within each of you. Namaste. Right. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you again either Wednesday or next week. Take care.